I am. Thank you so much. I'm really thrilled with this great turnout, and I think part of this is to Bruce and Margaret getting the word out. So I'm really glad you did that. It's my true pleasure to introduce Bruce. I was able to attend a very successful protest in Palo Alto the day after a almost as successful protest was held in Sunnyvale, and turned to Bruce for some help so that we could organize a protest in Burlingame last Sunday. And I am so grateful for that help because he turned me on to the Gandhi team, which helped me with, I have to turn something off, um, helped me with passing on nonviolent techniques to my team. And I was appreciated that so much. And I think that many of the strategies that Bruce is going to share with us tonight are going to be very helpful for all of us as we pursue the protests and the different ways that we're going to be trying to counter the coup that is upon us. So welcome, Bruce, and I'm going to ask everyone to please mute yourself. And if you have questions, we're going to save those questions to the end. And if you're invited to raise your hand at the end with your question, or you can add them to the chat. So, but take it away and please mute yourself in the interim. Thank you so much. And Bruce, welcome, welcome. So happy to have you here.
Great, thank you. And I'm really happy to know my wife and I were both involved in the Howard Dean campaign back in the day. And of course, DFA is the successor to that. So I was very pleased to know that there is a continuing effort. This group must have existed for, for many, many years. So congratulations on keeping that going. Okay. My understanding is that I have at least 45, if not 50 minutes. Is that correct? Although I'm going to try to not do 50. There are more slides than I can get through this evening. So we do what we can, and the slides are available, and I believe this will be recorded. So I'm going to have to talk fast because we have a lot of slides to get through. The links are all available. You will be able to peruse the slide deck at your leisure, and it's already up and live. Although I would encourage you not to cheat by jumping ahead as I do the presentation right now. I can't do screen share, so I will need screen sharing enabled. Looks like I can send request. Okay. Okay, let's see if it works now. Okay, here we go. And we will need, I believe, this one. Let's see if we start with the right window, which hopefully you're seeing. It should say the Musk-Trump coup and how to fight back. Yes, all right.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to go full screen on that.
This
And
is
are folks
what's
still
on it
seeing that
now.
now
I
as
was
full
gonna ask
screen
you
with
what I
this
do.
with the title screen? Okay, we got someone talking in the
Perfect.
background.
Perfect. Please mute yourselves.
Kirsten wanted me to go up on Friday to the March for
We
Science.
may need
Oh,
administrator to start meeting people. Thank you. Okay, great. Okay, so as Andrea Pitzer, the research journalist, says here, guerrilla warfare is composed of a million small acts to slow the ruling power through attrition, which is kind of one of the themes I want to give tonight. We're not going to talk about violent guerrilla warfare, but about nonviolent guerrilla warfare. Whenever you make a deck like this, you never know what's going to come out of the deck-making sausage machine. And what came out is at least 50% a training on nonviolent resistance, sometimes called civil resistance. Some of you are familiar with that, some will not be. So for those of you who are familiar with some of the content, we're doing level setting to bring everyone up to speed. The slides are available at bonhoeffer.tv/resist, and there are other resources on that page as well. The American flag is upside down because we are in a state of distress. Here's my background. So I got invited to do this, I'm not a political scientist, I'm not a historian, I'm trained as an engineer and a project manager, so you should treat this deck as one guy's opinion. That's really what it is. However, I'm an armchair scholar of active nonviolence theory, sometimes called civil resistance. I'm a board member of the Democratic Volunteer Center, which is active in both Santa Clara and San Mateo counties. Until 2024, I maintained a page of resources on democracy defense, also at Bonhoeffer.tv. Well, defense of democracy has failed, so I've switched to resources on resistance to autocracy and fascism, also at the same page. And I'm also currently contributing to the Tesla takedown protest efforts, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Okay, caveats, as I mentioned, I'm not a political scientist or historian. I have just as much trouble keeping up with the news as the rest of you. I haven't actually had a chance to read my Guardian daily news feed in quite a while. I'm too busy doing other work. And I'm not really an electoral politics person as much. I'm focused on other areas. So if you want to talk to me about who's running in the primary challenge in Pennsylvania State House, that's just not my bailiwick. But I do talk about nonviolent strategy and about how we're going to deal with the bind that we're in. Okay, here's the outline. We're going to do a catch up for folks on what happened in early February, because not everyone knows all the details of that, and I want to cover the salient details. I want to talk about categories of action and our options for that. We're going to talk about the pillars of power theory. I know some of you know that, some of you do not. And then we're going to talk about how we struggle for our democracy with two different strategic views, one from a nonviolent strategist named Daniel Hunter, and the other is based on an article by Indivisible. Just so you know, I have my chat closed, so I'm actually not able to see chat at all because I have to be able to see my slides. So moderators, if you suddenly need me to stop for some reason, please jump in verbally because I can't hear you. Great. We're going to talk briefly about Tesla takedown. It's an example of things you can get involved in now. And then general Bruce's opinion about things to do and not to do. Close with a high level view. Okay. There's some bonus slides. They're in the deck, but I can't talk about them tonight. We just don't have the time, but they're in there. Okay, so let's talk about what happened in early February. Okay, here's a blow by blow. January 27th, the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, issued a memorandum declaring what is this long verbose thing, temporary pause of agency, grant loan, and other financial assistance programs. Boring. What does that mean? It turns out it meant the hell of a lot. January 31st, an expert blogger who blogs specifically on payments issues within the federal government warns in his blog, and he diverts from what he was going to talk about and says, this is the most dramatic event in the constitutional law of fiscal policy in the United States ever. He said he read the memo and he literally went into a panic attack. Okay. That evening, a team of computer technicians, which is the Doge teenagers, reporting to Elon Musk, physically occupied the Office of Personnel Management and began accessing data. February 2nd, Sunday morning, Yale professor Timothy Snyder, the professor of fascism, used his Sunday morning essay to sound the alarm that we are in the midst of an administrative coup. That an administrative coup is when one branch of the government attempts to seize all of the power for itself. That was Sunday morning, and that's when I really became alert that this is what was happening. That was confirmed by Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who's a scholar of autocracy. That afternoon, she wrote an essay, A New Kind of Coup, Trump and Musk Are Updating the Autocratic Playbook. And what she noted there is that she's written about strongmen. Almost throughout history, the dictator has always been one man, one person, and this is the first time she's aware of that this pattern has been a duo where it's split between Trump and Musk. And so, yes, congratulations, they're making history, just not in a good way. Here's what she wrote on February 2nd. Musk and his surrogates have physically occupied OPM. They have set up beds to be there 24 hours. They've infiltrated the General Services Administration, which I believe that is the organization that controls all the building leases that we have seen canceled. It manages technology in government buildings. Random individuals whose credentials lie mainly in their loyalty to Musk have enormous power over America's purse strings and access to personal data. They have physically locked out the federal employees to prevent obstructions to this access. This is what militaries do during coups. You capture the major targets with government buildings on the list. You take over communications and other systems. Next day, February 3rd, ChooseDemocracy.us, which is run by Daniel Hunter. We'll be looking at his essay in a moment, and other folks. These are the folks who predicted the insurrection 6 months before it happened the first time. They said, this is not a quote test of the Constitution or testing limits of presidential power. None of these euphemisms. This is a coup attempt, a fully fledged coup attempt. And on the Center for Systemic Peace, which runs something called the Polity Project, this is the nonprofit that people look to rate how strong a democracy is. Front page from them, the United States is no longer considered a democracy, it is at the cusp of autocracy. It has experienced a presidential coup, an adverse regime change event, a successful coup on 20th of January 2025. So for those saying it can't happen here, folks, according to all of this, it already has happened here. And now the question is what we do about it. Okay. Let's look at action, because before we can really talk about how we respond, we need to understand sort of the range, broad taxonomy of actions. And this is based on Gene Sharp, his first volume, Politics of Nonviolent Action. Many of you may be familiar with this. He wrote a 3-volume series based on part 1. So this dates back to the 1970s, okay? Some bad political thing happens. What could we do? Traditionally, we're taught there's some responses. There's a diagram coming up in a moment. We'll look at this visually as well. I could do nothing. I could try to negotiate with the power holders to fix the situation. Maybe I can persuade them to do the right thing. I can use so-called institutional procedures, and this is what we understand. This means voting, passing a law, advocating for laws, or I could sue people in court. So this is everything that we do as part of democracy, voting, passing laws, kind of, and it's what government does, institutional procedures. Or I could get violent. Okay. And as an example, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I came up with suppose your landlord has just raised monthly rents in your entire apartment complex by 50%, right? The landlord is extorting, the rent is too damn high, right? What do you do? What would that look like if I did 1 through 4? Well, I could do nothing because I don't always have time to deal with issues like that. I could try to negotiate with my landlord and persuade my landlord to be nicer and lower the rent. I could get a law passed that says that my landlord is not allowed to raise the rent, or maybe there even already a gouging law or a rent control law that was already passed, and I could sue. That's all institutional procedures, and that's cool. Or I could turn violent. I could start smashing windows, or I could threaten the landlord, or there's all kinds of violent things I could do. I'm often not very productive, but it is an option for the traditional set of responses. Now, what I want to argue this evening and point out is there is a fifth choice of actions that we are often not taught, and it is a very broad set of actions called nonviolent action, sometimes now rebranded as civil resistance. And here on the right is Erica Chenoweth's book, Civil Resistance, What Everyone Needs to Know. That was published just a few years ago. It's in the references section, and I encourage all of you to read it if you have any spare time to do any reading, because it talks about what this entire discipline is. Erica is one of the main scholars, not the only one, main living scholar. Gene Sharp died a few years ago, but Erica is continuing to carry on the work. Here's Gene Sharp from the 70s. Nonviolent action is a means of combat. It consists not just of words, but of active protest, non-cooperation, and intervention. It is group or mass action, and is usually extra-constitutional. That means it goes outside of this institutional procedures. Now, many of us are familiar with protest. That is one form of nonviolent action, but we're going to take a brief look in a moment at Gene Sharp's list of 198 different nonviolent actions, and protest is just like 1 or 2 of those on the list. Here's the wheel. And I know you can't read this text. I took this directly from his book. This is what figures in books looked like in the 1970s when it was a big deal to have a figure in a book. You can see he actually turns it into 7. I turned it into 5 for the purposes of this talk. You can see the 3 at the bottom of the wheel are all types of violence. They're violence against people and property. So I'm going to ignore those because turning violent in any of your actions is counterproductive. It will turn people away from your movement. But you can see we have the do nothing option. We have simple verbal persuasion. So this is the persuasion option. We have peaceful institutional procedures backed by threat of sanctions. That means, if we have a law, I can sue someone, and if they refuse to follow the law, I can eventually send law enforcement in and sanction them, or maybe I can fine them. Okay, that's That's institutional procedures. But then there's also nonviolent action. And Gene Sharp's work was entirely about nonviolent action. And I'm going to argue that this section of the pie is actually much, much larger than the diagram would make you think it is. And what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to have to drop out of presentation mode so I can click this link. And we're briefly going to look just through the skim. Here is Albert Einstein Institute is Gene Sharp's nonprofit. Of course, he's not around, but he has folks who continue to run it. And some of you may have seen this list before. This list has been growing. I mean, people have augmented this. This is what Gene Sharp identified back in the 1970s. All of these different types of nonviolent action. We start at the boring stuff. I mean, public speeches are, in fact, yeah, a method of protest and persuasion. It gets very esoteric over here on the right side. He's got a whole section on different types of strikes. There's something called a bumper strike. I don't know what that is. I'd have to go look it up in the book. There's something called a hartal. I don't know what that is. There is haunting officials. There is taunting officials, skips and pranks. There's singing, right? So you can sing as part of nonviolent resistance. Then we have various types of non-cooperation. We can do various types of boycotts. We can go slow. We can have slowdowns, disguised disobedience. We'd have to look up what that is. And then it keeps going. This gets very, very esoteric, but all
Is
of
this
these,
okay? I've got chicken in here.
yeah,
Okay.
you may have it, but you could also need to mute. And then there's intervention, right? So there's different types of fasting. Here's the sit-ins you know about, but there's also, did you know there were stand-ins, ride-ins, wait-ins, mill-ins, and pray-ins? There are. There's something called nonviolent air raids. Every single one of these methods is documented by history because that's what Gene Sharp did. He didn't make things up. He looked at history and he wrote things down. So I want you to know there's a minimum of 198 different things you could do, and I'm going to give you 199 is coming up. So stay tuned in a moment when we get to that. Okay, so let's go back to my slides. And the point is there's this huge range of actions which are not just about phone banking and doing regular politics. Okay, now we have limitations in thinking. Let's talk about elected Democrats and how they think. Even the idea of a coup taking place in the United States is outside of things we talk about. I'm trying to normalize it because it has happened. The question is now, what do we do about it? Okay, no one taught me in school, here's what to do if there's a coup, right? I grew up with Schoolhouse Rock animated videos on my Saturday morning cartoons, and I learned something about US history, but there was never a Schoolhouse Rock about what to do if there's a coup. There actually have been people who've written books about this, but not necessarily for the type of coup we just had. Okay, elected officials understand institutional procedures. They're mostly lawyers. They mostly know how to work, right? They know how to pass laws. They know how to sue people because they're trained as lawyers, and I get that. That's their job. Okay. But they don't understand, the vast majority of them do not understand nonviolent action. It's beyond their accepted behaviors. And I'm going to argue one of the core takeaways I want you to take from this is saving our democracy and being the first movers is up to us, not to our elected officials. We cannot wait for leadership to lead the way. We at the grassroots must lead. And we have seen this starting to happen. We are seeing protests. We are seeing our elected officials being dragged, kicking and screaming into doing more. We're seeing this all over, and that is going to be absolutely necessary. As Tim Snyder said on a webinar last night, is our elected officials are not going to be radical unless we are being radical first. Okay, here is an example. And Ro Khanna is a great guy. I mean, he's my congressperson, but look, this is his email update from a week or so ago, like what I did for you in February. And I know you can't read, it's very fine print. Okay, I gave a speech. I did a talk at Mexican Heritage Plaza in San Jose. I spoke out, I gave another speech. I introduced a law. I introduced another law. I introduced another law, Supreme Court term limits. So all of these are institutional procedures. He knows how to introduce laws. Okay, well, good. He knows how to give speeches, and that counts as number one on Gene Sharp's list. Okay, so I'll give you credit for starting to put your toe into that list, Ro. But okay, here are things that were not in Ro Khanna's email update. Okay, Ro Khanna spoke at 2 Tesla takedown protests and encouraged people to come up with as many creative ways as possible to tank Tesla's stock price. Go after the stock price because that is going to go after Elon Musk. If you haven't heard of Tesla takedown, I've got a couple slides on that because we had a few gratuitous slides because I'm working on it. Okay. He didn't do that. Although it turns out one elected official in the Walnut Creek area has actually been dragged into speaking at 2 Tesla takedown protests because they are happening there. Good. Okay, here's another thing that email didn't say. With 6 of my fellow Democrats, I went to the Office of Personnel Management building, muscled our way past the security guard. We got arrested by private security, handcuffed live on social media, and recorded and posted videos that same day to tell everyone to disobey anyone who is cooperating with the coup. He did not do that. There were some elected officials who went to these buildings when we were all screaming and saying, could you at least go to the buildings and get in? And what they did is they went in, they walked up to private security and said, could we please get into this federal building that we, the Congress of the United States funded? Security said no. And our elected said, oh, okay, I guess we won't go in then. And people were screaming at them in social media to say, no, we want you to force your way in and get arrested because that gives us something to mobilize around. Okay, so Ro Khanna didn't do that. I mean, I wouldn't expect him to do that, but we need to get our electeds to the point where they will. Here's number 3, okay? And you're going to laugh, but I'm going to show you. You wait for that next slide. I, Ro Khanna, coordinated with 10 congressional staffers to release 1,000 live crickets into the House chambers, shutting down all GOP progress for the day and blocking them from passing an anti-transgender law because there were 1,000 crickets roaming all around the congressional meeting area. Okay. And you think I'm joking about crickets? Just a few months ago, youth activists released thousands of crickets to disrupt anti-trans hate group conference. Here we are from LGBTQ Nation. Activists released 6,000 crickets at a hate group conference right in the middle of a speech by Jamie Reed about which was anti-trans healthcare. A journalist released a video of the crickets showing these crickets infesting seats as conference hosts rallied people to vacate the premises. And we may laugh at this, but say, if you knew you could shut down what Hitler was doing for a day by releasing 1,000 crickets somewhere, would you do it? I would, and I hope the rest of you would. Okay, so I'm adding this as the official 199th list of nonviolent actions to the Gene Sharp list, okay, because cricket release did not exist in the 1970s, but now it does. Number 199, okay? There's a story here, and you can pick this up from the slides, is basically John Lewis continued to use protest tactics even after he was still elected to office. And this is about later that day, he means Newt Gingrich saying, Lewis needs to realize he's a congressman now, not a protester. And if you're pissing off Newt Gingrich, you're probably doing the right thing. So thank you, John Lewis. And Lewis said protest tactics were important tools. Why should I stow them away just because I'm an elected official? You have to reach beyond parliamentary procedure. You have to use certain techniques and tactics to dramatize. And I fell back on things that I knew from the early days of the civil rights movement. Thank you, John. We need more of that spirit today. Okay. Now, we've talked about those types of actions. So I've tried to introduce the fact that we have this broad range of actions which we are going to need to use as part of digging ourselves out of the coup that we are in. Okay, let's talk about pillars of power. And many of you may be familiar with this analysis. We assume sometimes falsely that power comes organically or naturally and just sort of emanates from powerful people, and the power is there. Somehow it radiates from them like some sort of radiation field. That's wrong. The pillars of power theory says that power comes rather from the consent and cooperation of the institutions and organizations that sustain the oppressor. There's going to be the slide, this will be done visually in the next slide, so you'll see it in a moment. And in fact, we can knock down the powerful person by weakening these pillars of power. We can do this without the consent of the power holder. We don't even have to be talking with the power holder to knock down these pillars of power, and often you aren't, okay? Here's Gene Sharp. This approach is control not by persuasion. You're not trying to have a conversation with them. You don't hope that the ruler changes heart. You simply cut off their power at the roots. And here's what it looks like. If you can imagine an oppressive regime up here, this is from the Pillars of Power picture. Now, the pillars are different depending on the nature of the regime or the power holder you're trying to knock out. In this case, you maybe have they're upheld by the military, by indoctrination in the schools, government bureaucrats, businesses. You always have to do a power analysis to say, what are these pillars? Who are the major power holders and institutions that are upholding this regime? And you can start doing nonviolent campaigns to start to whittle away at these pillars. And the more of these you weaken, eventually, if I pull out a bunch of these pillars, you can see the whole thing collapses. And that happens often towards the end. And we've seen that happen. There's a documentary called Bringing Down a Dictator about how they did this in Serbia. And this is how they do it. You whittle away at the pillars, and eventually the regime collapses. Okay. So what we've now talked about a broad range of types of action, and we've talked about doing a pillars of power approach. So I want to look now at two different strategic views so that we kind of compare and contrast those. One that is coming from Daniel Hunter, whose training is as a nonviolent strategist. So he works strictly in the active nonviolence or civil resistance domain. And then we're going to compare Indivisible. And I'm not trying to diss Indivisible, but what I'm going to argue is that we're going to need both, and we're going to need a lot more of Daniel Hunter. And add that into the mix, okay? This essay, so Daniel wrote an essay in November 2024, right after Trump won the second time, which is now the #1 most read essay ever on the nonviolence website where he writes. They'll think it's Waging Nonviolence, 10 ways to be prepared and grounded now that Trump has won. So we're working strictly from just one subsection of his essay, and I would encourage you to read the whole thing. But his part 5 was so important that, like, this info diagram has been circulating all over the place, and we'll be working from this tonight. There's not just one thing you can do. You don't just have to be out there disrupting things or doing protests. He split it into 4, and we're going to have one slide for each of these 4. Protecting people, particularly people who are groups that are under attack. Defending civic institutions, and we'll talk about what that is. Disrupt and disobey, and build alternatives. This is kind of like long-term alternatives. Okay, so let's look at what these are. I was actually very happy when I read this part because I'm actually very into protecting people, and there's lots of groups under attack that I would like to be able to protect. And so when I read his essay, I was very happy because Daniel was telling me it's okay as part of resistance to fascism and to autocracy to be working in this area, but you can work in multiple areas, and most people do. Okay, 4 paths. Protecting people, that's protect people who are under attack. He particularly lists immigrants for obvious reasons, the LGBTQ plus community, transgender folks, women seeking pregnancy and abortion care, and I have added scientists and federal workers onto the list because scientists are under attack, federal workers are under attack right now. Here's some examples. Some local, in fact, and I'll give you a link for sign up in a couple slides. San Mateo County Rapid Response Program. You have an immigrant defense program. We have a similar one in Santa Clara County, which is ICE Defense Rapid Response. There's also Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity is based in Oakland, but covers the whole Bay Area. That's an immigrant rights, immigrant defense sanctuary organization. The Trans Youth Emergency Project works nationally. They will be speaking to the DVC on a webinar in a couple of weeks. I'll sign up for that. They provide emergency funding to help families of trans youth get the care that they need. And Bridget Alliance is a direct hands-on abortion rights group. They do not do advocacy for laws. They're like, we're getting you money, we're getting you a plane ticket, we are getting you into a hotel in a blue state where you can get the abortion that you need. That is what we do, brass tacks on the ground. And that's just some examples. Okay. Number 2, defend civic institutions. This is all from Daniel Hunter's essay. He mentions insider groups will play a central role. So much of this defending civic institutions needs to start from within the institutions. But think of all these institutions we know and have read just recently are under attack. USAID has been almost dismantled, although it's in the courts. EPA is under attack. FAA, all of these organizations. NOAA has lost huge amounts of people. We don't know if we even have weather forecasts in this country anymore. And the employees matter, but the rest of us need to be supporting all of these federal employees. And we need to basically undo Reaganism here and say, government matters, federal employees, we like you, you are important, you are doing important work so that the rest of society can survive and thrive, because that's what they do. Okay, make noise to support your federal employees under attack. How can you do that? Here's an example. Anchorage, Alaska Daily News 2 days ago full page ad. We, the undersigned, support Alaska's federal workers. And look at all these signatures they got. So they got 100, 200, 300 people together and took out this full page ad saying mass firings compromise our safety, stability, and prosperity. And this is in Alaska, which is not exactly bright blue like Santa Clara County. That we are being hurt by this. Demand that we stand up for our federal employees. So that's great. That is public testimony of support to defend civic institutions, federal employees. Okay. Number three, here's Daniel Hunter continuing, disrupt and disobey. It is either physical intervention or symbolic intervention to stop bad policies or demonstrate resistance. We know sort of the classic example we all know of is the sit-in, but remember I showed you 198 different types of actions. Sit-in is one of those, and since I added crickets, we're at 199, right? The goal per Hunter is to pave a path for mass non-cooperation. Tax resistance comes very late in the game. National strikes comes very late in the game. Full shutdowns and mass disobedience. His organization is starting to work in this direction. I think they're anticipating this is going to be a long haul to dig our way out of where we are. And you've got to build up like labor union strength and other union strength so you actually can do national strikes. Now, there's a caution from me here. To do these really big, large-scale collaborated event, you have to build sustained movement coordination. It takes a lot of build-up. You can't just go onto social media and say, "Hey, everyone, do a big, purchase blackout on the 28th of February," like someone tried to do. I've got a couple extra slides on that if you want to address that during Q&A. That doesn't work because you haven't built the infrastructure. So you cannot bypass the coalition building, the movement building by trying to post something on Facebook or other social media. Okay. Number four, build alternatives. This is the longer term thinking and visioning. So we do have to have a vision. What does our society look like? In all areas of how we do work. What does it mean to get rid of neoliberalism? What does it mean to get rid of predatory capitalism? Slow growth, here I'm quoting Hunter again, building alternatives that are democratic, grounding, healing, culture work, ways of growing food and caring for our children and budgeting. Okay, here's my opinion. I'm interjecting. I think there's a strong need on building alternatives, or at least building infrastructure, to have written core principles and vision, not just policy positions for the Democratic Party itself. I went looking for core bedrock principles to the Democratic Party. I found a platform which has policy positions that says things like we support universal health care. Universal health care is a policy position and is not a core principle. It's not like FDR's freedom from fear, freedom from want, right? So I think we need that for a new Democratic Party for the new era. So you'll notice work within the existing political process is not part of what Hunter wrote. He's doesn't come from a political politics background, so that's not sort of part of what he does. If you were to ask him, I think he would say that in his vision, that comes very late in the process. You build the nonviolent juggernaut first, and then it basically finds a political vehicle and washes in and elects a whole bunch of people and gets its policy positions passed into law, but only at late in the stage might be what he says. Okay. I think it's going to be necessary to do the so-called institutional procedures, the indivisibles. I mean, what you as a Dem Club probably do a lot of that is phone banking and texting and letter writing. Yes, we need to do that, but it's not going to be nearly sufficient. Okay. We do eventually, you need a political vehicle. Eventually, that's probably going to be the Democratic Party, or it will have to be some viable, strong, very challenging to build third party alternative. But we know that's very challenging to do in this country. Okay, so now let's pivot and look at indivisible for the contrast because it's worth looking at the contrast. This is from a op-ed they got published in The Nation a couple weeks ago. Ezra and Leah are the founders of Indivisible. And here's what they wrote, their advice to Democrats. And I put that in quotes because that's what they said. Here's our advice to Democrats. Slow the Senate, make congressional Republicans work for Democratic votes, break the norms around congressional collegiality, and work with the new surge in anti-Musk, anti-Trump grassroots energy. And you may notice, I realized when I read this, when they say Democrats, what they mean is elected Democrats. They don't mean me as a rank and file Democrat. Why is this? Both Ezra and Leah are former policy directors. They're insiders who have served elected officials. Their bread and butter, the water that they swim in, is electoral politics and pressuring electeds to do the right thing. And they're doing that right now with, oh, we're doing town halls, Musk or us town halls. Go yell at your folks in town halls. And you should do that. We should follow what they do because that is great. Go yell at whether it's they have a path for GOP, they have a path for Dems. Like, go do what they say because they've got that kind of protest, they've got it down. But I do want to say that what they are no longer just focusing on the 2026 elections, thank God. They're thinking shorter term, which in this case we need to do. Tim Snyder on his webinar last night said that the only people who should be thinking in terms of a timeline of the 2026 elections are people who are actually running for elected office in 2026, because 2026 is 10,000 years away in terms of the timeline we are in right now and the fascist coup. Everybody else, if you are not actually running for elected office in 2026, your time frame needs to be, what am I doing in the next 7 days from today? What am I doing in the next 30 days? And that he literally said that. And it's very unusual for Bruce to sit here and advocate short-term tactical thinking, but that's right from the lips of Tim Snyder. And I get that. All of us need to be thinking, not what are we going to do for the 2026 election? What are we going to do in the next 7 days and the next 30 days? Okay. Now, what if we're not elected officials? This is from the essay in The Nation. We should be organizing in our own communities, engaged neighbors, pro-democracy volunteers, and educators. Okay, that's kind of weak tea, in my opinion. I mean, it's something to do, but they're not saying go out and do nonviolent resistance, which you need to do. They have a chapter guidebook, which is kind of similar. It's all about electoral process. Just realize they're not civil resistance people. It's not in their DNA. So be aware. We have many new indivisible chapters springing up, and it's fantastic, and we need them. And those chapters are doing other things as well. But Indivisible National is going to be focusing on, this sort of standard business as usual procedures. And amusingly, they had to release a Tesla protest guide because there were so many indivisible chapters on their own doing Tesla protests at Tesla dealerships that Indivisible is trying to get ahead of the train by releasing a Tesla protest guide. So the rank and file are dragging Indivisible National forward, and that's all a good thing. Okay. Don't wait for them to tell you what to do. You tell them what to do. Okay. So here's a plug for Tesla Takedown, because this is something that's happening right now. And I'll tell you, these takeoff events do not happen very often. This could become as large as the George Floyd protests. You never know until it's already passed you by. It is Disrupt and Disobey from the Daniel Hunter essay. You can find that on TeslaTakedown.com. You can also look on mobilize.us and look for Tesla, because different people organizing use different ways of listing their events. I don't own TeslaTakedown.com. I do have a San Francisco Bay Area site for it. We're trying to reduce Elon Musk's power by hammering the Tesla stock price. We do that by reducing sales, which have already dropped a lot. And we do reduce sales through a variety of actions. We've started with actions at dealerships, protests, signs, leaflets. And the wonderful thing is, so this is the case where someone said to me, well, Elon Musk isn't going to listen to you. He's not going to pay attention to your protests. And I said, the wonderful thing is, I don't have to care if Elon Musk is watching these protests or not. I am not speaking to Elon Musk. I am speaking to people driving by on El Camino, and we're holding up signs that say, honk for democracy, don't buy Tesla. And we're leafleting and say, don't buy Tesla. So we're speaking with the American consumer to vote with their feet. Okay. Protests are happening. They are growing. People are getting pissed off and showing up. We started seeing our first Ukrainian flags show up at last week's protests. That's great. If you're mad about something else, one way to do this is come join these protests, and you're welcome to, show up and join. We're going after Tesla as a way of helping Ukraine as well. Okay. I will mention the other scary thing Tim Snyder said yesterday was, you need to protest now, because if you do not protest now, you will not be able to protest later. Rather ominous. That may very well be true. So we need to recover our right to protest. There were sort of collaborated campaigns last year to strangle campus protests. It was a very coordinated campaign, and we need to recover our ability and our right and maintain that right to protest. San Mateo County, I looked up some of these. I don't have the sign-up details, but maybe other folks on the call will know. Do that during Q&A. Burlingame Tesla, San Mateo Indivisible is doing it on Sundays. I think it's going to be weekly. I think San Mateo Indivisible is brand new, actually. Redwood City, as far as I know, does not have a Tesla dealership, but Portola Valley Indivisible and Surge Redwood City are going to do protests anyway, so good for them. Okay. And here's some pictures from Palo Alto 2 weeks ago. We had 550 people turn out for this. This picture is not 550. If I took it, it would be all the way down the street for multiple blocks. You can see there's the Tesla dealership right there. There's some close-ups, and we were getting thumbs up from cars. And so thanks to the pro bono photo folks for doing these photos, because they do much better photos than me. Okay, now, so that's our gratuitous Tesla takedown. I want to give you some lists of things to do. I'm going to skip a couple of these just for the sake of time. You'll see the media stuff we can come back to in Q&A if you want, but I don't want to give you overload you too much. Okay, take care of yourself physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Okay, and this always has to come as number one, because this is going to be a long haul. That's the argument I'm going to make. This is not something we're going to fix in a week or a month, even though I'm telling you, you need to think in terms of a week and a month. It is very possible. Activist burnout is a very, very real thing. There have been many essays written about it. So you have to take care of yourself, get your community, and do what you can. But if you're working 12 hours a day, every single day, on trying to fight the coup, you're going to burn yourself out. That's not good. And it will start manifesting as physical symptoms. You can do the same thing to yourself with too much doom scrolling on social media. So you really have to regulate your social media. Learn how to communicate with non-political people. We're all political people on this call. You have to learn how to talk and communicate. George Lakoff's Don't Think of an Elephant. Please go read that. He's the Berkeley cognitive linguistics professor who will tell you all of the mistakes that liberals make when we try to communicate using our Enlightenment thinking. And we need to understand that's not how you communicate. We make so many mistakes in our communication, and you see them over and over and over again. Here's one essay about that. Cut the knot, banish the word not from your communication, from framelab.org. Again, all these links are available in the slides that you can look up online, but that's your one essay is go read about removing not. I think I've got another bullet point about that. Anat Shenker-Osario has the Freedom Over Fascism messaging document. That is a big, long Google Docs URL. She updates it. That's linked at bonhoeffer.tv/resist. And she does movement briefing Zoom calls. And unfortunately, there's no simple click here to join. You're going to need to email me to get invite to those. I believe I have the ability to send out an invite to those, but she makes it a little bit challenging to get in. She does those roughly every 2 weeks, and they're national calls. There's like 2,000 people on those now. Okay, more things to do. Use the power that you have wherever that you are. That's why I can't tell you necessarily specifically what you should be doing, but you need to pick something that you're going to work on that thing, and be aware there are many, many things, very important things that you simply will not be able to work on because you're just one person. Even if you're in a group of 10, you can't work on every fire that's going to be started every day. Here's an example, and I really like this. I picked this off from Mastodon of someone using their power where they are, and she really understands where she is. I'm resisting in place. I'm not going to march. I already hold public office. It's called public librarian. I make queer and trans people feel at home. I change their name in the catalog, and if my coworkers change it back, I change it back again. I make rainbow brochures. When those rainbow brochures get stolen and trashed, I make some more. I put book challenge information on the website, and I am safe zone trained and in the trenches. Public librarian, she understands her job and how to resist. And public librarians are huge. Hopefully we can find people supporting public librarians, because there will come a time when this librarian needs support, right? Strength in numbers, okay? More things to do, in-person community. Wonderful, you're doing that. We're in a community right now. I am encouraging people to do face-to-face community, do potlucks, touch grass, get together physically with people so you can make sure you maintain your sanity and fight off all the gaslighting that's happening in the media every day. Create and participate in campaigns, not just one-off protests. Now, I'm telling you to participate in Tesla protests, but there's an arc of the protests here. We have a campaign goal, which is reduce Musk's power. The link here is to a classic essay by George Lakey, the Quaker activist, about the importance of campaigns over one-off protests. You can get the link from the slides. And expand your range of activities, as I mentioned. Start adding some nonviolent action and civil resistance into the mix. So if you're just postcarding and phoning, that's institutional process. We need that, but you could probably be doing more. Okay. We're going to skip the media stuff, much as I would love to be your mother here and say, here's what you should do. I mean, the one thing I'll look at here is I do recommend Choose Democracy from choosedemocracy.us. These are the nonviolent resistance folks and Daniel Hunter and friends. These are the folks who predicted the insurrection before it happened the first time, and they basically predicted the coup that happened. They put out a book titled What If Trump Wins? And they put that out 9 months before he did. So I hope soon they put out they need to put out a book titled How We Won Over the Coup, because maybe everything they put out a book about comes to fruition. Who knows? But this will get you into the mix about them thinking about civil resistance. Okay. Not to do. Do not use violence against people or property. Do not support groups or events that are supporting violence against people or property. It will weaken your movement. That has been proven empirically by the social sciences. Do not rage react to today's horrible thing that happened on the news cycle. You're not going to be able to fix today's horrible thing. You don't necessarily have to share it. If all you're doing is sitting on social media, amplifying horrible things that happened, frankly, you are part of the problem. Stop doing that, because amplifying the horrible thing is just increasing people's despair, and despair is really counterproductive. Don't relitigate 2024 election. There's and similarly, it's parallel point. Watch out for circular firing squads on the left. Okay. We on the left love attacking each other because sometimes we feel like we can't do anything about the right. So let's go after each other and attack each other over purity. This shows up in sort of blaming on the 2024 election. Well, if only all of you Palestinian activists has gone out to vote. Well, if only all of you Israel activists had not done your thing, right? You can pick any issue you want, right? Or some people want to relitigate Bernie versus Hillary. I'm up for a round of, Gore versus Nader. Let's not get there. But if you see that happening, avoid it and try to get folks to say, we are fighting amongst ourselves. We need to actually fight the fascism in front of us, okay? And no public angsting. Oh my God, have you seen the latest horrible thing that Trump posted to social media? Let me share that. He posted apparently the thing on Twitter with him wearing the crown and saying, I'm the king. And so many people on the left rushed to amplify his message by retweeting it or posting it to say, look at this horrible thing. When you amplify their content, you are just doing exactly what they want, which is giving them more coverage. Don't share the bad thing, right? That's part of the trick, okay? And none of this, they're doing XYZ, we're doomed, okay? Not to do, I think this is the last one. Not to do, watch out for not. This is the essay I told you to read. I am not a crook is the classic mistake. Nixon said, I am not a crook. And everyone said, what, crook? Oh, that reinforces the crook frame. Don't say immigrants are not criminals. Haitians do not eat cats. Coal is not clean. All of these are examples of reinforcing the opposition's language. It just strengthens the frame when you put the word not in front of the thing you're trying to deny. There's other ways of doing this, right? You can talk about clean energy without saying coal is not clean. Don't do that, okay? And similarly, don't repeat language of the oppressors. I'm trying to discourage people from using the construction make X, Y again for any X or Y, and make clean energy great again. I'm sorry, but any use of this construction in a sentence just invokes make America great again. Trump basically owns these neural patterns in our brains, and you're just going to trigger thinking positively about Trump. So I'm discouraging that. Don't use lock him up for whoever, not, it doesn't matter who him is, even if it's Elon Musk, and don't deport. If lock him up is good, then that must mean locking Hillary is up. If deport Elon is good, it must mean deporting other people is good. And that's not what we want. Okay. Not as progressives. Okay. So here's my recap. Think over the next 7 days, Which one of these are you going to start to do based on where you are and who you are and the people you know? And you have a lot of range of options. You can go read Daniel Hunter's essay for some inspiration. Protect people, defend civic institutions, disrupt and disobey, or build alternatives, or some mixture of all of them. And I'm going to give you some upcoming events so you have no excuse. There is de-escalation training to help you become a safety person at all sorts of events. That's in San Jose on March 15th from San Jose Gandhi Team, which is an experienced set of nonviolence trainers. There they are, gandhiteam.org workshops. San Jose, that's an in-person 2.5 hours. San Jose in what, 10 days? Be there. San Mateo County, so rapid response training for your county is the next day. It is offered in Palo Alto. The information is there on multifaithpeace.org. You don't even have to remember this. You're not going to memorize the whole number. You can go to multifaithpeace.org and look at their articles. They will send you to the sign up link for this. And they're actually training for San Mateo and Santa Clara counties at the same time. You don't have to sign up if you attend, but it's worth attending to learn what it is. And maybe some of you will sign up. Trans Youth Emergency Project is speaking at a DVC webinar March 23rd. Learn who they are. We're amplifying their voices. And we have ongoing Tesla protests. Look at teslatakedown.com. Okay. Now, here's the high level view. And then I have one quote to close this down before we go into Q&A. So hopefully I'm at my 50 minutes and haven't totally bludgeoned us on time. Okay. This situation that we are in as America is not something we can fix fast, in my opinion. You think about all of the forces that are interlocking and arrayed against us, and we know what they are. There's Fox, there's OAN, there's the billionaire capture of the Washington Post, and so much other media. The New York Times has really not been helpful at all. The New York Times is really captured by its own institutional culture. Supreme Court justices, the structure of the Senate, Citizens United, and on and on and on, right? And at least 30% of the US population is just really, really wants to bring back segregation and bring back Jim Crow. Okay, that's hard. I would argue that where we are today dates back at least 54 years to the Powell Memo of 1971, and you can look up what that is in Wikipedia. That was titled Attack on American Free Enterprise System. It is a right-wing memo written by a right-wing Associate Justice of the Supreme Court in the wake of them losing the civil rights movement. And he proposed to the right and the pro-segregationists, basically the Southern faction, that they should, one, create lots of think tanks, and two, create lots of media. And very soon after that, we saw the creation of the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, the American Enterprise Institute, all of these right-wing think tanks. In roughly 1980, we saw the creation of Fox News. We saw right-wing media spring up. We saw right-wing Christian networks coming on from the 1970s. They did this. They've been working on this for over 50 years. So it may take us 54 years to win this back. And a lot of people don't want me to say this, but I really want all of you to assume this was going to be a long-term fight and we need to pace ourselves appropriately. Okay, so with that, the US flag remains upside down. And I want to close with this quote from Jonathan Schell. I do not know if we can build a better society. I don't even know if we will survive as a species, but I do know these forces have us by the throat and they have my children by the throat. I do not fight fascists because I necessarily know I will win. I fight fascists because they are fascist. Okay, and with that, I'll turn it over to Q&A. The slides are available on Bonhoeffer.tv Resist, and thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Bruce. I think it was just terrific. And we're asking everybody if you would please raise your hand to put you into the Q&A, into the queue. And I see Diana has got her hand raised.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say right off that Bruce, you did not disappoint. It was such a pleasure to have you tonight. And I'm a little bit I'm just shaking. I'm so excited about the information you gave and excited about the potential for all of us. And so I just wanted to make that come. Oh, I did want to say that I did witness people at a couple of the protests. They were yelling at Tesla drivers. And I want to encourage us not to do that. I was listening to a program on Forum this morning, and they were talking about Tesla drivers. And this one driver called, and he said that he went into the Tesla showroom. Every single person in that showroom was there to sell his car. And it would have cost him $10,000 to do that. And he said, I just can't afford to do that. So these stickers are just jumping off the shelves saying, I bought my Tesla before I found out Musk was an asshole or whatever it is it says. And so I just want us to, you know, remind ourselves that Tesla owners are not the enemy here. Musk is the enemy. And so I just wanted to make that comment. But again, thank you so much, Bruce. This was really fabulous.
Right. Yeah, and I can comment on that. I agree with that. And in fact, we just released um, windshield leaflets to put onto Tesla cars this morning, which attempt to take a not Schenker-Osario's approach, and they try to empathize with the Tesla. So it's not attack. It doesn't say you are scum for driving this car. It says Elon Musk is a problem. We know that driving a Tesla used to be cool. It's not cool anymore. And we're trying to the flyer rebrands the Tesla as a Musk mobile. So it's associating Musk with the Tesla brand, and then we provide often options for selling the car. But you're correct. I mean, and the more general principle is that there are many people. There are Trump voters will need to get onto our side, and the whole the whole frick around and find out. I mean, there's been people on the left who ought to know better who say, well, after these Trump voters have suffered enough, then they'll realize they need to vote for Democrats. And that's not how it works. You can't go to them and dump Schadenfreude on them and say, boy, you were stupid. So you stupid people, you should vote for us instead. Well, dude, you just called them stupid. So you don't have to persuade them that they're bad, and you should not. You just have to persuade them they were lied to. And Tim Snyder pointed this out last night, is like the economic suffering, particularly for red states, is already baked into what's going to happen. So don't wish more suffering on them. The suffering is going to happen. What matters now is who is going to explain what happened to them. There's going to be a fight for who owns the narrative, because the right wing is going to have their explanation. You're suffering because transgender people did this to you, because Joe Biden did this to you, because Hillary Clinton, because Black people. We need to come in and say, you were lied to. It's not, you're a good person, you were lied to. Here's what the vision we as Democrats can offer. Come into our community.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really well said. Marshall?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Diana's comment that Bruce is a great talk. And I just wanted to point out to those that may not have heard early on that the link to your slides is available in the chat, and that because you gave really a fire hose of information, and having the slides is critical so that you can follow up with many of the links and the ideas and so on. So I encourage anybody that didn't hear it earlier to find in the chat Bruce's link to his slides. That was the main comment I want to make.
Yeah, I'll put that in there
I
again.
couldn't
So if
agree
you go
more
to
with
that,
the other things. Yeah.
yeah, if you go to that link, it's on the, that's the full site I've just pasted. You'll see all links there, but you'll see one that says a presentation by Bruce at DFA. Just look for DFA San Mateo County there, and it should be a working link to the slides. And there's a big references section, like 4 pages of references and a bunch of extra slides I couldn't touch tonight.
Excellent, excellent. So my question for you, Bruce, we were talking about supporting Fed employees. Is there anything local that, we're talking like in, is it parks, going to the parks and supporting? I mean, any ideas on other things we can do locally other than Tesla, which.
Well, and the other things, and get rapid response trained or peace ambassador trained or et cetera. So I haven't done any reach out to that. I mean, the way I would start by doing that, and I think that is valuable and it would be a great project for someone to pick up. The kind of the philosophy I've read recently is, I think it was the head of the National Federation of Teachers said, okay, new rule, anytime you say someone should be doing this thing, then you're probably the person who should be doing the thing. And that's what I said for myself, like this morning, when I'm like, someone should be doing a leaflet for Tesla windshields. I'm like, oh, nuts. Now I have to do it. Like, if I were to start on that, I would reach out to national parks employees. I would ask the affected communities, what do you need, right? So you start by not just starting in a vacuum, but like, because this is the classic mistake a lot of us, especially educated white liberals, make is, I'm going to think about how I help. Bruce is going to think about how you help pregnant women without actually talking to any pregnant women right now. Um, Parks employees and also NOAA, like atmospheric people who work in atmospheric forecasting. Okay, we just lost like weather radar for a big chunk of the Bay Area 3 days ago. For those of you who have not been following this story, there's a weather, I don't know if it's back yet. And there's San Francisco Chronicle reported on it, and like there is very grave concern that we can't fix it because the funds are frozen because Doggy is in the system and blocking the funds. And we cannot accurately do tornado alerts for like the entire northern section of California, or at least for my county and yours, unless this radar is working. They're like, they can sort of tell if it's raining, but not always. All right. So that would be an example. And there's the guy is on Blue Sky posting. I'd say, hey, how can we help you? You can always go follow what is it? The Alt National Park Service folks on Blue Sky. They are so fun to follow. The Alt National Park Service was a resistance group founded during the first Trump administration, and it is federal employees, but they have a huge network. You don't want to send them direct messages. They get so much intake that's like talking to someone when 100,000 people are trying to talk to them. But I would start that way, is by reach out to federal employees that you know and say, tell me what's going on, and how can we help?
Okay, and I did see in the chat suggestion to go to the veterans hospitals, and we've got VA hospitals here on the peninsula. That's and that's a good local. Thank you. Ashley, you're up next.
Okay. Great talk, Bruce. Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us. I have friends who are armchair activists. What they have done is, oh, well, first of all, they're throwing up their hands and saying, oh, there's nothing we can do, nothing we can do. But what they have done in the past is contribute to worthy causes. And I'm wondering, I'm going to keep pushing them to try to get involved in actual action. But are there groups they're saying, where can I donate my money? Now, where's the best place? And one place I have suggested is the ACLU, because they're doing lots of legal work. But are there other places where they can contribute and be helpful?
Obviously, there's a huge range of 501(c)(3)s and 501(c)(4)s out there to donate to. And a lot of this depends on what exactly you're looking for, right? I mean, ACU is a big, large establishment organization. I think I stopped donating to them a while ago because they refused to take a strong position against Citizens United. At least classically, there have been some folks, and the ACLU has had too much of the free speech absolutism, sort of pre-internet view of speech. And I think we need to get rid of Citizens United. They're like, no, it allows more speech, and the more speech is better. We're like, no, not if billionaires can dominate it. So I Peter, it's always a curation process. I'm trying to give to organizations Sharon, you need to mute. There we go. To organizations that are smaller and maybe need the money more because they're often not getting the money as much. I often try to find the smaller 501(c)(4)s. Sometimes they're at the state level. And there's curation groups that do this as well, that will find them for you, that are doing grassroots group. There's like folks in North Carolina. There's a group in West Virginia doing it. And these are kind of hybrid political and non-political organizations. Now, in terms of strategic nonviolence, there is climate defiance. If you want the folks who are actually like, they're not tame. Let's see, make sure I get this right. I think it's climatedefiance.org. There they are. Yes. Okay. Maybe I can even share that. Okay. They're going to be so happy I'm plugging them tonight. Okay. Not for the faint of heart. Okay. So, even there, we don't do petitions, we do direct action. We're going to defeat fossil fuel fascism. We will defy Trump. There's no other choice. So these folks are the act up of the Stop Fossil Fuel movement. And that's what they do, arrest actions, but the guy who's running it seems to have a clue and seems to understand strategy. He understands the need to build a movement. But in terms of the cutting edge of groups that are going to be pushing the envelope in the direction we need, they're a group that is doing that. And they definitely don't have a whole lot of money because they're never, ever going to get foundation money. They're not the kind of group that's going to get foundation funds.
Well, thanks. I'm gonna go about 3 or 4 minutes more, but we are wrapping up now. Mimi, you got a question?
Yes, thank you so much. Excellent talk there, Bruce. So glad to hear this through Margaret. I wanted to let you all know that thank you for highlighting alternate national parks, for the national parks, because they're the ones that organized the last weekend the Protect Our National Parks and Forests, and that was noon last Saturday, and people showed up nationwide for that. They're probably going to do something again, so do keep an eye on alt national parks. So I just wanted to mention that. And then I had put in the chat, I was in a talk with the largest union president of federal employees, and that's Everett Kelly. And the name of his union is the AFGC, and AFGE. So that's the American Federation of I don't know what the G is, something employees, but
Probably government employees. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not thinking government employees. So I will put that in the chat again. And I look quickly at the site, and they have call scripts to call Congress and ways to support them. So I will put that in the chat right now. And so thank you very much. Someone touched upon what I was going to say, the Alt National Park group. Thank you.
Well, and more generally, for those still in the workforce, unionizing your workplace or doing anything to sort of support unions, we need as much union strength as we can get. And it's very hard to unionize in this country, but we need as much union strength as we can get, like actual labor unions.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Elsa, you got a quick question?
Question and comment. I'm so sorry. In addition to the great Tesla operations, because sometimes Teslas aren't on El Camino, it's fabulous to choose the biggest intersection near you. And at the next day or the next week, I guess a couple of days after the big one in Tesla Palo Alto, there was also a gathering at El Camino and Page Mill, which is a gigantic, right in the heart of Silicon Valley arena area. And you don't need Indivisible for that. You can start it as Bruce said, and then call the Indivisible people, but call the local Democratic groups also, and call DFA and get all of us there as well. There's also another Tesla event that's happening in Colma, which is also San Mateo County, in addition to the one in Burlingame. But this leads into Ro Khanna. I have to say, Bruce, yesterday sent out a note saying that he was going to 3 Republican districts that have majority Medicaid constituencies, and he was giving speeches, yes, there, but rallying the troops to have them invade their legislators' offices. That's fabulous to do. And a little bit from now, I'm going to talk about a plan that we invented, and we're working with the Physicians for National Health Program and with the California Nurses Associations, and then those national groups to target first the 7, or I think it's the 9, actually, California Republican
Elsa?
districts.
Isn't
Yes.
that going to be later in task force reports?
Yes. So if you could stay to hear and
Yeah,
help.
but we're at 8:15,
Right.
so I want to
I
wrap
just
up
don't want
one last.
everybody to disappear. Sorry. Bruce, thank you, thank you, thank you.
If you're interested in that, stick around because that's coming up. But oh, I want to finish up with Bruce. So, Bill, you've got the last question.
Okay, great presentation, Bruce. The one thing I didn't, unless I missed it, I didn't really hear enough emphasis on. I want to make a plug for coalition building, and the reason I'm bringing that up is Diana and I were involved in the organizing for the Burlingame demonstration we did. It initially was a Tesla thing, but we didn't hold it in front of Tesla. And the beauty of that event was the number of people who came out for that event from San Francisco, Marin, all the way down to San Jose. I met people from all over, and they were coming for all different kinds of reasons, and they were coming from a lot of varieties of resources, people who contacted them and brought them in. Diana and I just started a fire, and it built off of that through a number of community organizations. And I want to just say that I think where our power is going to be, at least one power we're going to have, is we've got to continue to have these street demonstrations on a regular basis, at least weekly, and now it's starting to be several times a week. So I'm excited about that because it's getting a lot more people involved, engaged, and it's going to lead to their engagement in some of the other areas you talked about tonight.
Right. And so I should respond to that. And yes, you're right. So one thing to keep in mind and one thing to do. So the thing to do is when those folks do anything you can to try and get those folks' email addresses, right? So a mobilize page is great. Not some people just refuse to sign up for anything, but you need to be building so that protest does build the movement, and being able to communicate with those people in the future is a crucial way to do that. So, and don't rely on them just going and following on Facebook or whatever. And remember, Facebook's a Zuckerberg platform, so it's already been problematic. Get their emails if you can at all, QR codes, whatever it takes, right? And that's how you build strength. And you're right, we're starting to see now groups that aren't the normal sort of protest type political groups come in for a variety of reasons, and that's going to grow. It's for at least some time it's going to grow.
I'm also just talking about people themselves, people walking by, seeing the protest, join in.
Yeah.
It's that kind of momentum now.
Yeah.
It's not just an institutional thing.
Give them a leaflet with a thing, or have a big QR code that says sign up here to learn about the next action. Actually, if you can do that, scan this QR code to sign up for our next action, and then you've got their at least their text number or something.
We were doing that. It's organic and it's building.
Okay. The other comment I would make is that
I have to tell you that the reason we were doing that was because we used your model of the half sheet that we got at Palo Alto. So that's why we were doing it.
Replace the QR code.
Yeah.
Good. QR codes to the win. Anything, either if you at least get their mobile numbers, you can text them, or I love emails because I'm an email guy. So the other thing I'll caution about is protests will always, we're in the middle of what we call a takeoff event, and movement strategists have understood these. It's going to peak at some point, right? The protests are eventually they're not going to continue forever. And a lot of people get disillusioned because they think that the movement's going to peak and that's when you win. And it typically, when the street protests, it's not. You don't win when the street protests have peaked. You win later. And there's this so-called trough of disillusionment when the protests have waned and it seems like you haven't accomplished anything. But if you've built that infrastructure while the takeoff event was happening, you are moving majority support to your side, you're making people aware, and you lay the foundation for building in the future. So I'm already kind of trying to position us mentally for that. These protests eventually will die. And I don't know if it's going to be in 2 weeks or in 2 months or what it's going to be. Usually these things last for 6 months max, but be aware that we're building for the future. It's what you do now that is building for that future, building strength.
Great, thank you. I'm going to wrap this up right there. I want to say out, Diana has posted in the chat. So if we've had a lot of people ask about the recording of tonight, and it is going to be available. And Diana has suggested to send a note to her at diana.94062@gmail.com. And that way she can, if you're not already on our mailing list, she can get a copy of the recording to you. We're also working to see if we can find a new webmaster. So if anybody is interested in helping us with the technology, this is a perfect example of one. We would like to have this posted up on our website so that it's easily shareable. But I wanted to thank everybody that's come. We are going to continue our meeting, and you're more than welcome to come and stay and learn a little bit more about our club. But Bruce, I want to give a hearty thank you. This has been an amazing, amazing talk, and I think it was. We were all so ready to hear everything you had to say, and really glad that as you said, we're ramping up, and we got to catch people when the enthusiasm is right there and active, and find them something to do, and that way then you can then keep them active and busy along with us. Thank you again, and we are going to go ahead though now and move on. We're going to talk about